Hello, dear students, good morning. In our previous session, we have discussed and read about the author's journey, which began from Ravu. So, the author, with his friend Daniel and driver Seaton, they started their journey from Ravu to Mount Kailash. So, Seaton, he took a shortcut to get off from Changtang, and he knew a route that offered to take them to southwest and almost directly towards Mount Kailash. So they started driving across the rising and falling hills, and they reached a place where plains became more stony. Then they came across a herd of wild asses, and as they started crossing further, they came across some drokbas, the shepherds tending their sheep. They also passed nomads, dark tents, their big black dog that chased their car, barking furiously. Then the track moved away from the icy river. The author felt the pressure building up in his ears. Then they also came across a swathi of snow that lay across the track in front of them. So it was stretching up to a distance of 15 meters, and there was fear of slipping, but Seaton, he crossed the patch safely after covering the snow with soil. And then they had to stop at another blockage, and it was again a long stretch of ice. And this time, Seaton decided to drive round the snow. The slope was steep, but Seaton showed his driving skills, and once again, they crossed that patch of snow safely. So reaching the top was difficult. The ascent gave the author throbbing headache, and he drank water there to ease himself down. And they had reached the top of the pass at 5,515 meters. So here they saw huge rocks which were adorned with white silk scarves and prayer flags, ragged prayer flags. And Seaton, he started to check his car, and he found that the petrol tank, when he opened it, he unscrewed the top. It emitted a loud hiss. So it was dangerous, but he just laughed and joked that he said to the author that he should not smoke there. So he also checked the tires and rest of the car. So from here, now we will read further that how the headache, the author's headache that was there, because when they started descending down the slope, the headache cleared. And it was 2 o'clock when they stopped for lunch at a long canvas tent beside the dry salt lake. They had hot noodles there, and the plateau was actually disfigured. The lake was filled with salty water, thatched roof covered with snow. So it has also the traces of the extinct Tethys Ocean, which used to be the border of Tibet there. So before collision of the continent, it was believed that there existed Tethys Ocean, but now only the signs, the vestiges of Tethys Ocean could be seen there. So salt watery lakes were there. They were brackish. Here brackish word means the lakes were of salty water. So there was flat salt flats were there, far stretched everywhere. The stretch of salt could be seen there, and few men could be found working there with pickaxes and shovels. They were wearing sunglasses to minimize the glare coming from the trucks loaded with pile of salt. They were also wearing boots which were actually encrusted with salt, and long sheepskin coats. So the author says that by late afternoon, we had reached the small town of Hor, back on the main east west highway that followed the old trade route from Lhasa to Kashmir. Daniel, who was returning to Lhasa, found a ride in a truck, so Seaton and I bade him farewell outside a tire repair shop. We had suffered two punctures in quick succession on the drive down from the Salt Lake, and Seaton was eager to have them fixed since they left him with no spares. Besides, the second tire he had changed had been replaced by the one that was as smooth as my bald head. So the author says that how by late afternoon they reached Hor town. The name of the town is Hor, and it was back to the east-west highway. So it was on the old route from Lhasa to Kashmir. And Daniel, uh, he found a ride as he was on his way back to Lhasa. He found a lift in a truck. So both the author and Seaton, they bid him farewell. They were at the tire repair shop at that moment, and their car suffered two punctures on the way from the Salt Lake. So Seaton was eager to get them fixed. So they had no spare tire left with them, and the second tire, which he changed, was replaced by a smooth tire, just like the head of the protagonist. The author says that it was just like my bald head, because the author the unke sir pe baal nahi the. So he compares the bald head with the smoothness of the tire. And thus he says that it was just like that, क्योंकि बहुत रिस्की हो जाता है अगर आपका टायर जो है वो स्मूथ है, सो कार जो है स्लिप हो जा के चांसेस ज़्यादा होते हैं. So further, the author adds, Hor was a grim, miserable place. There was no vegetation whatsoever, just dust and rocks, liberally scattered with years of accumulated refuse, which was unfortunate given that the town sat on the shore of Lake Mansarovar, Tibet's most venerated stretch of water. सो ऑथर यहाँ क्या कह रहे हैं दैट हॉर जो है एक अगली एंड मिजरेबल प्लेस है विच हैड नो वेजिटेशन एंड जस्ट डस्ट एंड रॉक्स देयर. वहाँ पर सिर्फ आपको गंदगी, धूल मिट्टी और पत्थर, बड़े बड़े पत्थर ही दिखाई देंगे. सो ऑथर फाउंड इट क्वाइट grim, ugly, and miserable. And it is scattered with gathered refuse, and it was quite luckless, quite unfortunate. Author को ये बहुत unfortunate लगता है that it was on the shore of Lake Mansarovar, which is Tibet's most respected water, pious water. So जो venerated means respected. सो वहाँ पर जो लेक मानसरोवर है इसे बहुत पायस लेक माना जाता है. सो पिलग्रिमेज दे विजिट दिस लेक, दे टेक अ होली डिप देयर. सो वहाँ पर जो गंदगी इतने सालों से इकट्ठा हो गई थी, द एक्यूमुलेटेड जो लिटर था वहाँ पर, इट गेव अ डर्टी लुक टू द प्लेस. सो ऑथर फाउंड इट क्वाइट अनफॉर्चुनेट दैट it was on the shore of Lake Mansarovar. And ancient Hindu and Buddhist cosmology pinpoints Mansarovar as the source of four great Indian rivers, that is the Indus, the Ganges, the Satluj and the Brahmaputra. So यहाँ पर जो वर्ड है कॉस्मोलॉजी, जो वर्ड है कॉस्मोलॉजी, इसका मतलब है साइंस अबाउट द ओरिजिन एंड डेवलपमेंट ऑफ द यूनिवर्स. तो जो कॉस्मोलॉजिस्ट है, एंशियंट हिंदू एंड बुद्धिस्ट के कॉस्मोलॉजिस्ट जो हैं, दे पिन पॉइंटेड अकॉर्डिंग टू देम दैट ये जो लेक है मानसरोवर, इट वाज द सोर्स ऑफ फोर ग्रेट इंडियन रिवर्स. उनके अनुसार इंदस, गंगा रिवर, सतलुज एंड ब्रह्मपुत्र, इनका सोर्स क्या है? मानसरोवर. बट इन रियलिटी एक्चुअली ओनली द सतलुज फ्लोज फ्रॉम द लेक, बट द हेड वाटर्स of the others all rise nearby on the flanks of Mount Kailash. So we were within striking distance of the great mountain, and I was eager to forge ahead. So author क्या कहते हैं कि it consists of जो according to the ancient and Buddhist cosmologist, so ये मानसरोवर जो है source of four rivers है, but in reality only जो सतलुज है it flows from the lake, and the other three rivers rise near the sides of Mount Kailash. So the author says that they were at a remarkable distance from Mount Kailash, and he was eager to move ahead. Forge ahead means to move ahead without any delay. But I had to wait. Seaton told me to go and drink some tea in the horse only cafe, which, like all other buildings in town, was constructed from badly painted concrete and had three broken windows. The good view of the lake through one of them helped to compensate for the drought. So the author says that he waited for Seaton there while having some tea at a cafe. Horse जगह पर वहाँ एक cafe था, so he waited there having tea. And he says that this cafe was very badly constructed and from painted concrete, and three broken windows were there also. But he said that still he had a good view of the lake, so it compensated the drought. The thing that he was missing there, it was compensated by the view of the lake that he had sitting beside the window. I was served by a Chinese youth in military uniform who spread the grease around on my table with a filthy rag before bringing me a glass and a thermos of tea. Half an hour later, Seaton relieved me from my solitary confinement, and we drove past a lot more rocks and rubbish westwards out of town towards Mount Kailash. So the author was served tea, and it was served by a Chinese boy who was wearing a military uniform. And the author says that how he spread the grease around his table with a dirty cloth, filthy cloth that he was holding in his hand. It seemed as if he had just spread the grease on the table. क्योंकि उसने जो गीले कपड़े से गंदे कपड़े से पोछा लगाया, it felt as if he had just spread the grease, and then he brought him a glass and a thermos of tea. Then, after some time, Seaton came and he freed him from his private detention, the loneliness that he had because he was sitting lonely there in the cafe. And then they started their journey ahead, passing more rocks and rubbish. Now, the author also shares that my experience in horror came as a stark contrast to accounts I had read of earlier travelers' first encounter with Lake Mansarovar. So the experience that author had at Hor, it was quite opposite to the experiences of other travelers. The experiences that they had written in different books, they had shared about their experience. It was quite opposite to them. He had read on travelers' first encounters of the town. So he mentions the name of Ikai Kawaguchi. He was a Japanese monk who had arrived there in 1900, was so moved by the sanctity of the lake that he burst into tears. A couple of years later, the hallowed waters had similar effect on Sven Hedin, a Swede who wasn't prone to sentimental outbursts. So he talks about two persons. One is Ikai Kawaguchi, who was a Japanese monk and who arrived in the town in 1900. So he was so moved by the purity of the lake that he cried. उसके आंसू निकल आए थे seeing the sanctity, purity of the lake, the holiness of the lake जो थी उसको देखकर महसूस करके this Japanese monk, he cried. And after a few years, similar effect was felt by Sven Hedin. He was a Swedish man and he was not used to having such an emotional outburst. इस तरह के जो emotional expressions देना वो उसके आदत नहीं थी, but he also had the similar kind of experience. वो भी वहां आकर रोने लगा था, the seeing the sanctity of the lake. But author का जो experience था, it was opposite from these two persons. Further narrator, he says that it was dark by the time we finally left again, and after 10:30 p.m. we drew up outside a guest house in Darshan for what turned out to be another troubled night. So काफ़ी अंधेरा हो चुका था जब वो वहाँ से निकलते हैं एंड 10:30 पीएम था। वो कहते हैं कि वो डार्शन पहुँचते हैं वहाँ के गेस्ट हाउस में, दे टेक रेस्ट देयर, बट वो कहते हैं इट वाज़ अनदर ट्रबल्ड नाइट फॉर द ऑथर। तो ऐसा क्या हुआ था दैट उनको इतनी प्रॉब्लम हुई? So, kicking around in the open air rubbish dump that passed for the town of Hor had set off my cold once more, though, if truth be told, it had never quite disappeared with my herbal tea. One of my nostrils was blocked again, and as I lay down to sleep, I wasn't convinced that the other would provide me with sufficient oxygen. My watch told me I was at 4,760 meters. It wasn't much higher than Ravu, and there I had been gasping for oxygen several times every night. I had grown accustomed to these nocturnal disturbances by now, but they still scared me. So author क्या कहते हैं that when they resumed their journey from Hor, it was dark at that time, and at 10:30 p.m. they decided to stay in a guest house which was in Darshan. So he says that this turned out to be another difficult night for him. So the rubbish dump in Hor made his cold worse, and the herbal tea also could not help him. And one of his nostril was blocked, so as he lay on bed, he was feeling uncomfortable. He wasn't getting sufficient oxygen, सो वो सो नहीं पा रहा था. यू माइट हैव एक्सपीरियंसेस व्हेन यू हैव कोल्ड कि जब आप लेटते हो तो आपकी जो नॉस्ट्रल्स हैं वो ब्लॉक होती हैं, तो यू आर अनेबल टू ब्रीथ. सिमिलर वाज द कंडीशन ऑफ द ऑथर. वो सांस नहीं ले पा रहे थे एंड ही चेक दिस वॉच. उन्होंने क्या देखा दैट दे वर एट 4,760 meters above sea level. The height was not more than Ravu, but he would be out of breath several times at night. and he was so familiar to these type of disturbances. जो nocturnal disturbances means ये जो परेशानी जो रात को वो झेलते हैं because of cold, he had become accustomed to it, used to it, but this time he was quite scared. इस बार जो तकलीफ उनको हो रही थी वो काफी इससे घबरा गए थे. Tired and hungry, I started breathing through my mouth. After a while, I switched to single nostril power, which seemed to be admitting enough oxygen. But just as I was drifting off, I woke up abruptly. So author क्या कहते हैं, started breathing from his mouth and he was tired and hungry. So he switched back to breathing from single nostril, and as soon as he was about to sleep, he would wake up shortly. Abruptly, अचानक वो नींद से उठ जाते हैं. So he was not feeling well as his chest felt heavy. So he says something was wrong and my chest felt strangely heavy, and I sat up, a movement that cleared my nasal passages almost instantly and relieved the feeling in my chest. Curious, I thought. So narrator क्या कहते हैं कि as he was not feeling well, he felt his chest heavy, he sat up, and this movement of getting up, it cleared his nasal passages and it actually gave him some relaxation. But he said that this was quite curious. He was curious at that time, and उन्हें समझ नहीं आ रहा था कि ये क्यूरियोसिटी क्यों हो रही है, बिकॉज ही वॉज ऑल्सो नॉट फीलिंग वेल एट दैट टाइम. So he says that I lay back down and tried again. Same result. I was on the point of disappearing into the land of Nod when something told me not to. It must have been those emergency electrical impulses again, but this was not the same as on previous occasions. This time, I wasn't gasping for breath. I was simply not allowed to go to sleep. So author क्या कहते हैं कि after that he again tried to lay back on the bed and tried to sleep, but same thing happened, and it was as if he was going into the land of sleep, and something while in that at that time something told him that he should not go to sleep, he should not do it, and he wasn't able to go to sleep this time. So when he was sitting up, it made him feel better. And but he says that this time he was not gasping for breath. वो सांस लेने के लिए संघर्ष नहीं कर रहा था, but वो सिर्फ सो नहीं पा रहे थे, and something told him that he should not sleep at that time. Sitting up once more immediately made me feel better. I could breathe freely and my chest felt fine. But as soon as I lay down, my sinuses filled and my chest was odd. So yeah, he again tried to go back to sleep lying down, but he was not able to do that because same thing happened again. He again felt the tightness in his chest, and then he was not able to sleep again. He could not breathe properly again. I tried propping myself upright against the wall. Propping means sitting straight, जो वॉल का सहारा लेकर वो बैठने की कोशिश करते हैं, बट नाउ आई couldn't manage to relax enough to drop off. And he says I couldn't put my finger on the reason. Putting finger on the reason means कारण का पता लगाने में सक्षम ना होना. He was not able to find the reason why it was happening, so why he was now not able to sleep. And he says, but I was afraid to go to sleep. A little voice inside me was saying that if I did, I might never wake up again. So I stayed awake all night. So he was afraid to sleep now, and a voice inside him told him that he might die if he would try to sleep, and that is why the author he stayed awake all night. वो सारी रात सो नहीं पाए क्योंकि उनको ये डर हो गया, डर मन में बैठ गया कि अगर वो सो जाएंगे तो शायद दोबारा जाग नहीं पाएंगे, शायद उनकी मौत हो जाएगी. Seaton took me to Darshan Medical College the following morning. The medical college at Darshan was new and looked like a monastery from the outside with a very solid door that led into a large courtyard. We found the consulting room, which was dark and cold and occupied by a Tibetan doctor who wore none of the paraphernalia that I had been expecting. Paraphernalia, the instrument that are used by the doctors. No white coat, he looked like any other Tibetan with a thick pullover and a woolly hat. So, when I explained my sleepless symptoms and my sudden aversion to lying down, he shot me a few questions while feeling the veins in my wrist. So Seaton, when he saw the condition, the worst condition of the author, he took him to the medical college, which was in Darshan. And the author क्या कहते हैं कि ये बिल्कुल एक मोनेस्ट्री की तरह लग रहा था, जो मोनेस्ट्रीज होती हैं, जापानीज मोनेस्ट्री, बिल्कुल उसकी तरह लग रहा था. From outside, it had a solid door that led into the large courtyard. And there was a consulting room, and the doctor, he was a Tibetan doctor, जिसने कुछ भी डॉक्टर के इंस्ट्रूमेंट्स नहीं पहने हुए थे, वाइट कोट भी नहीं पहना हुआ था, और वो एक आम नागरिक की तरह ही लग रहा था. And the author, he explained everything to the doctor. He talked about his sleeplessness, the symptoms that he had, and the aversion to lying down. That means how he avoided to lie down, how he was afraid of sleeping at that moment. He shared everything. And the doctor, he says that he shot me a few questions. So doctor, he started asking him a few questions as he was trying to read the pulse from his wrist. The author said, it is a cold, he said finally through Seaton, a cold and effects of altitude. I'll give you something for it. तो वो जो डॉक्टर है वो क्या कहते हैं कि ये तुम्हें सिर्फ ठंड लगी है और ऑल्टीट्यूड का इफेक्ट है. सो ही सेड दैट ही वुड गिव हिम some medicine. I asked him if he thought I would recover enough to be able to do the Kora. Oh yes, he said, you will be fine. So author जो थे क्यूरियस थे ये जानने के लिए कि क्या वो अपने कोरा को कंप्लीट कर पाएंगे. तो डॉक्टर जो है वो कहते हैं डेफिनेटली तुम अपने इस कोरा को परफेक्टली कंप्लीट कर पाओगे. So I walked out of the medical college clutching a brown envelope stuffed with 15 screws of papers. So screws of papers mean छोटी छोटी जो है पुड़िया सी बनाकर उस डॉक्टर ने दवाइयाँ जो थी उस पैकेट्स में दे दी थी. And I had a 5-day course of Tibetan medicine which I started right away. So author decided to start with the medicine right away. I opened an after breakfast package and found it contained a brown powder that I had to take with hot water. It tasted just like cinnamon. तो जो पहली डोज थी, it was a powder brownish in color and इसका टेस्ट जो था cinnamon के जैसे था, जो दालचीनी होती है बिल्कुल वैसा स्वाद था. So he had to take it with hot water. The contents of the lunchtime and bedtime packages were less obviously identifiable. So the author was not able to identify the taste, that what was it inside those packets, because उसे समझ नहीं आया कि वो दवाइयाँ किस चीज से बनी हुई थी, but he had to consume it. So both contained small spherical brown pellets. So छोटी छोटी गोलियां थी बनाकर जो डॉक्टर ने दी थी, उन दोनों ही पैकेट्स में कुछ स्फेरिकल जो थी मेडिसिन थी. दे लुक्ड सस्पिशियसली लाइक शीप डंग. सो ऑथर कंपेयर किससे करते हैं कि शीप डंग की तरह वो दिख रहे थे, जिस तरह से वो छोटी छोटी गोलियां थी. बट ऑफ कोर्स आई टुक देम. दैट नाइट आफ्टर माई फर्स्ट फुल डेज कोर्स आई स्लेप्ट वेरी साउंडली लाइक अ लॉग, नॉट अ डेड मैन. सो ऑथर क्या कहते हैं कि आफ्टर टेकिंग दोज मेडिसिन ही फेल्ट रियली बेटर, एंड आफ्टर टेकिंग द फुल डेज मेडिसिन ही स्लेप्ट पीसफुली दैट नाइट. वो गहरी नींद सो पाते हैं, आराम से सो पाते हैं. कहते हैं लाइक अ लॉग मीन्स ऐसे लकड़ी का टुकड़ा पड़ा होता है, नॉट लाइक अ डेड मैन. वो एक डेड मैन की तरह सोए नहीं थे, बेसुध होकर नहीं सोए थे, बट येस ही हैड अ गुड स्लीप दैट नाइट. So, dear students, we will stop here and we'll continue reading this story in the next session. Keep reading. Have a nice day. Thank you.